now time for Bradford and Brooks, a civil discourse about civil affairs in Bardstown, Kentucky, and around the world. Please welcome your host for Bradford and Brooks, Margie Bradford and Jim Brooks. Now, get ready to enjoy a community forum to encourage citizen participation in the political process by the thoughtful discussion of political and civil issues.
All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks and Margie Bradford here after the break. And we just wrapped up a pre-recorded interview with Chad McCoy. Today, Bradford and Brooks, we're interviewing the candidates for 50th District State Representative. And of course, Chad McCoy is the incumbent, and his Democratic challenger joins us in the studio live this morning, Mr. James DeWeese. Good morning.
Good morning, James.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today.
Glad to have you.
Well, it's really good to have you in the studio, and of course we've talked many times before, and always enjoy our talks. And you and Chad will be facing off tonight as well at the Civic Center in a live debate televised on PLG.
Yes, and that'll be 6 p.m. So I look forward to the debate tonight, and I hope everyone tunes in and here's what we have to say tonight.
Well, and the advantage, of course, to debate like that. Is that you'll have an opportunity to respond, and to statements from the other candidate. So it's more given, a little more give and take there. Anyway, look forward to covering that this evening. But right now, Margie and I consider these opportunities for the candidates. Talk a little bit about themselves and what you bring to the table. As a candidate, and why you want to represent the 50th District.
Well, first of all, I'd like to make a very important announcement, and a very proud announcement, is that I have just received the endorsement of the Kentucky State FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police. So with that endorsement, also, we also have the endorsement of the firefighters and also a number of labor organizations. But in addition to that, we've now have all the teacher groups that have endorsed my campaign as well. The KEPAC, the Kentucky Educational Association, Better Schools of Kentucky, and also the 120 Strong, which is the grassroots movement led for public employees and teachers. So I am very proud to announce that we've just received the Fraternal Order of Police endorsement. And so we're very proud of that one.
Very good.
Yep.
James, what do you hear? What are the major issues that you are hearing from the voters that you're talking to? The major issues in this race?
Well, we've knocked on a lot of doors, and we've had a lot of conversations with our folks out here in Nelson County. And there's a number of issues that people are very concerned about. One is the lack of transparency in government, and how the legislature handled themselves in terms of bills of just pushing legislation through because it can. Taxes are a very important one. We've had a shift in taxes from onto the working families here in Nelson County and across the state, and people are very concerned with the taxation and the service tax that was just implemented, and also education. Education is a big one. People have seen the issues affecting public workers and teachers, and that's a lot of we have a lot of people here under those pension systems here in Nelson County, and they're very concerned with that, in addition to what's happened with charter schools and other worker and paycheck issues. So there's a lot of concerns out there that people have expressed to me in our campaign that they feel that needs to be addressed.
Senate Bill 151 was challenged in court and is currently, I guess, heading to the state Supreme Court for adjudication on its constitutionality. And that kind of leaves the state a little bit in limbo about pension reform.
Yes.
During Senator Jimmy Higdon's debate, he said that until that's adjudicated, until there's a decision, the General Assembly can't really, the response will have to depend on whether it's determined to be constitutional or not. And I think one of the main issues was, the cut and replace, that we do with computers. Well, I think the text of that original bill was eliminated and then replaced with pension reform. And I think that, and that's part of what was challenged, I believe, that process. That's not a new process. That's happened in other bills in the legislature. However, I think there were some other issues that that Democrats took issue with, as far as their ability to participate in any discussion related to that, because that was done at the last minute. What are your thoughts on that process? Was it you said was the process a problem, or just the whole way this was done as a package?
Well,
Objectionable.
I think the whole way it was done was the problem. Okay, it didn't have the 3 readings required. There wasn't an actuary analysis.
Right.
And these legislators knew better than that. And my opinion is they really waited to the last moment to pass this to see what type of competition they were going to have in their own races. And that's my opinion of what really happened. And then they made it a little bit better than what they had planned,
Right.
and rammed it through at the last minute. And people, again, that a lot of people has problems with that, including myself. I like seeing discussion happen, and I like seeing the time it takes to craft the legislation and have debates and have discussion to make sure it's right for our state. And when you look at what's happened, particularly in the budget, with that same type of mentality, now our churches and a lot of nonprofits are suffering under attacks because they didn't understand the consequences of what they had done.
Right.
Unintended consequences of
That's
what
right.
they did.
Right.
That's right.
I'll use my now CASA again, our CASA pork chop lunch that we worked so hard on, and we ended up paying like $350 in taxes.
Yeah.
For that. So that immediately took away that much from our funding. So yeah, it's hard, especially for groups like ours who depend on every penny that they can get, because we run strictly on donations.
That's right. And then to attach a bill of that importance to a sewer bill, it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
What ideally, and I've heard thoughts all over the place. I think the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy suggested that really that this matter will take care of itself as long as the funding as things are
Right.
funded adequately. What are your thoughts on this? Because my gut feeling is that the Supreme Court will look at this, the state Supreme Court, and probably agree with the lower court on Senate Bill 151. If elected, you'll be a freshman legislator, and you will be one of the legislators tackling this issue and having to debate it.
And I'll be a freshman legislator, but it won't mean I'll be quiet about the subject either. And I'm boisterous anyway, and particularly when it comes to paychecks of working families and our educational system. And, in my opinion, this is rather than rush to what they had done in terms of pensions and different things, they should have looked at new revenue. And new revenue in terms of expanding gambling, and also the legalization of marijuana, and also close some of the loopholes that the wealthy have, and where we have the most wealthy paying the least percentage in taxes. We should have closed some of those loopholes and took care of the issues out there that we have, and funded our pensions, funded our schools. There's other ways around this than the quick to cut mentality that they went toward.
Now you mentioned you protect workers' paychecks. This is nothing new to you, because I think in your professional career you defend working families and the through your work. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I've been advocating for with this since I've been about 18, 19 years old. I've essentially done this my whole adult life, and it started when I was a young teenager on a shop floor, and I just began to open my mouth as to what I felt was right and wrong, and I haven't stopped, and I'm not going to stop.
Well, I think people want a legislator who is going to make his or her views well known.
That's right, and I will not be quiet on any of those subjects. You know, when you talk to people about their paychecks, you know, that is such an emotional thing, and whenever we have taxes increase on working families, and that's really what's happened, and you know, and they've shifted the burden onto working folks, and as we approach the end of the year and people file their taxes and they see this, several $100s can mean a whole lot to a lot of families, and we have to be sensitive about those subjects, and as a legislator, you really have to look down to the effects of everyone of what's going to happen, because you know that's several $100s that can't be spent in our local eatery, or several $100s that may be needed for a bill or clothes for the children or school supplies. You know, so you know, those are the things as a legislator that I'll be thinking of when I approach a bill and vote on it, to see how it's going to affect our folks here.
Your opponent was discussing that as far as taxes and sales tax goes, that their point of view is that the sales tax, income tax rate needs to drop, and consumption tax, sales tax expanded.
Okay.
And this past General Assembly was the first step of several steps to kind of more closely model Indiana and Tennessee.
Right.
Of course, Tennessee has a much, has an expanded sales tax and no income tax. What are your thoughts on modifying the tax situation in Kentucky to more closely model those other states?
Well, I'm against that, and I'll tell you why. Well, let's look at Tennessee first of all. They have a high tourism rate. A lot of those tax dollars come from tourism. Nashville's a huge tourist destination. Gatlinburg, Memphis, Tennessee. We enjoy our tourism here, but it's not to the magnitude of somewhere like Tennessee, where you have a lot of outside dollars pouring in. But those are very regressive, and when you look at the income inequality in Tennessee, they're at a much higher level than Kentucky. In fact, with this taxation that they've put in, we have now went from the 34th to now the 25th in income inequality across the country. So our working families shows that they are bearing the burden of these taxes. Now, let's look at it on another level. Here in Nelson County, we enjoy a lot of small business, and we are blessed with this small business. This now puts an extra layer of burden on them as well. The skating rinks, the veterinarians,
Right.
the auto repair places, the golf courses. They are now bearing this burden of collecting these taxes, but we also bear that burden as well when we have to get our pets taken care of, our car repaired, our lawns mowed, and different things of that such. So it is, you mentioned the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. They have written extensively about this tax shift and how it affects working families. And I'm just against that completely. And while we gave folks who make $175,000 or more a tax break, those making under $175,000 is now bearing that burden.
Now, in our interview with Mr. McCoy, he said that everybody who's subject to the state income tax, their rate dropped from 6 to 5%. So essentially, everybody got a tax break if you pay income taxes.
Well, that's only a piece of the story, though.
Right.
Let's start talking about the deductions that they have taken away. They've taken away the deductions of property. They've taken away. Here's another big one. They took away the deduction of the master settlement funds. So that affects our farmers. And then in addition, to add the 6% tax layered in with 41 other or taxes on 41 services, and then to say, hey, we're going to expand this even further next time. We think this is the best way to go. I disagree completely. And states who have that type of tax system, their income inequality from the working to the wealthy is very, very far, spread apart very far. So I disagree with that type of taxation. It affects working folks. I want our working families to prosper and to do as well as they can. And, again, we need to close those loopholes for the very few.
Now, the thinking is, from my understanding, is that, if you allow taxpayers to keep more of their income because you drop the tax rate, but my question is, if you're expanding your income tax, they could easily pay, depending on how expensive your car repairs are, you could easily pay that much or more than the tax break you get from going from 6 to 5%.
Absolutely, and that's what happens. And let's look at the people that affects us the most, our elderly, who has limited income, okay, and who may not have the huge or more of the tax break in the tax, but they also have to have their lawn mowed, and they're having to pay that tax. Their car is possibly a little bit older, so they're having to pay for repairs there, and they're also having to pay for a number of other services because being elderly, you're going to have the help to get along. Right. And and we're essentially attacking the pay of our most vulnerable, and so I take issue with that tax, with the tax structure that they've imposed.
Right. And I think many of the elderly may not even qualify for the tax break because they don't have the income, but they're still paying the resulting sales tax.
Oh,
and in addition to this, here's one of the things that's not talked about often is the pensions. Okay, so before you had $41,110 that was exempt, and they've lowered that to $31,110. So by 10,000. So now, you're exempt up to there, but past that, you're now going to be paying taxes on 10,000 more. Again, this is our most vulnerable. And when you look at the services that they begin to tax and they're opening the door of this service tax, if you look at the industries, to my opinion, these are industries that don't have lobbyists either in Frankfurt.
Well, that may be true too. Now, Mr. McCoy said that these industries were targeted because they currently pay sales tax. For example, your garage, you get your car fixed at, they have to charge sales tax on parts they sell you.
Yeah.
And just like the groomer, the hair salon, they sell shampoo. The groomer sells me doggy treats, and they had to charge sales tax. So they weren't forced to start collecting a tax they were not familiar with.
I don't always agree on that. Swimming pools don't sell things.
Well, now, if you've got a company, I've seen swimming pool providers or the service companies sell accessories.
Accessories, I understand.
Yeah, so I think that may be that. But
those sales taxes, even still, were a very small part of your bill overall.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And, when you get your when you get auto repair done and the alternator cost $150, but the time it takes to get to the alternator and do the complicated repair, you may spend $500 or $600 in service fees.
Sure, yeah, you can. I can't tell you how many times I've had a $200 in parts and a $1,200 labor bill.
Yes.
Right.
And so instead of just paying tax on the parts, you're also paying now a tax on the service.
And let's also keep in mind on this too, when your pet gets sick, that's an unexpected expense, right?
Sure.
It's part of the family, so you want to take care of your puppy, and your baby. Also, when your car breaks down, that's an unexpected expense too. And so when working families have those unexpected expenses come up, they're very large bills and necessary bills. And to further tax those bills, I disagree with that. I take issue with that.
Okay. All right.
One of the things James said we like to ask is, what special skills or experience that you have that you think will benefit you the most in Frankfurt? And I'm thinking about your past experience in negotiations.
Okay.
So tell us about that.
Well, part of what I do is a part of negotiations and coming to agreements, learning to reach across the aisle and come up with solutions. But I think one of the qualities that I have that is essential for that type of work, and also being a legislator, is listening. And listening to people's concerns and understanding how that concern affects them, and also caring. You have to really care about people. You know, this isn't a job I'm asking for to do for myself. I truly want to help out our county and our state and working families here, so that we have what we need to be the very best county, state, and country we can be.
Quickly, James, would you support an effort to repeal the existing charter school law? And why would you oppose what's in place now?
Well, I'm completely against charter schools, and there are pockets around the country where they have been a success, but they also, there's a large portion of them have been very problematic with corruption, with the closing of the schools, and they're publicly funded in most all cases, and it essentially takes tax dollars away from our existing public schools into these for-profit charter schools. There's so many negatives with the charter schools. I cannot support them at all. But I do think that as a legislator, and I think all legislators, one of the priorities that they should have in place is education, because that is our fundamental foundation for our society. And the stronger education that we have, our kids have, the better society we're going to be. And right now, and for quite some time, education has been underfunded in this state. And that is one of the priorities that I have. I have 2 children in public school. Really, I can't afford to send them to private school, so I want public education to be the very best for them, along with any of the other children. And when I see the resources our teachers have, it's very inadequate. You look at some of the textbooks, and I've had teachers send me pictures of their textbooks, of tattered textbooks.
Oh, they haven't bought them in years.
No, and the teachers need resources, and my wife helps out in the schools with her own kids when she can. And our teachers shouldn't be subject to providing these supplies either for the children. Right. We need to give teachers the resources they need, but we also need to give teachers the resources they need for themselves, which is a pension. And we shouldn't be attacking this pension system that they are under. The teachers need to be well paid, and their pension needs to be well funded. We need the very best teachers that we can in our school system to teach and educate our children, because when we have a strong education system and our kids become adults with the skills they need, that's truly the thing that companies are looking for when they come here.
Yes.
And that are now adults entering into the workforce can do the job that needs to be done. And we have a lot of skill sets in Nelson County, and I'd like to help continue with that and improve them.
Well, James, we're down to about the last 2.5 minutes. So I'll
Okay.
give you an opportunity if you want to make some sort of closing statement. I know that my only comment about charter schools, and you kind of hit on it, was that unlike public schools, if you have a bad charter school, you can close it.
Yeah.
And whereas with public schools, you don't have that luxury of being able to close it, but you would still have to replace it with something else. It's still going to be expensive. So, I don't think there's ever enough money to adequately fund education, and especially if you follow the trend of local education, the public school districts having to have a greater share the trend is they're paying more than half of the cost, and the state's funding is drying up essentially. So it's a tough road to hoe for our superintendents.
Yes. They have a very tough road ahead of them.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I used up your time, but we got a minute and a half. You can. Why vote for James DeWeese for state representative?
Well, I have the interest of our county at heart, and I truly care about our county and our state and working families, and I hope to be the legislator that you'll be proud of in protecting our pensions, protecting our teachers, making sure our education's funded, and also our paychecks are protected and we can thrive in our communities. So I'll just leave it at that, and I hope I can count on your support November 6th And the polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And voting is very important no matter which side you're on and what your issues are. I ask that just everyone go vote. Let's exercise our right that people have died for in this country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and that's November 6th.
November 6th.
And of course, Margie and I always encourage our listeners to be sure and exercise their right to vote. Well, Margie, we're down to about the last 30 seconds. Thanks for coming in today. And James, thank you for coming in today and discussing your candidacy. We both wish you the best of luck. We'll see, is it 2 Tuesdays from now, yesterday?
It's not soon enough.
Thanks, James. Well, that's going to be it for this week's Bradford and Brooks. We'll be back on
Friday.
this coming Friday with a special edition. See you then.